Hi, my name is Jenny Batchelor, and I'm one of the people that signed up for week 6 for Code and Power with Dr. Reginald Rolston. And this week we are focusing on hegemony, which I hope I just said right. Merriam-Webster defines hegemony as being the dominance of one group or country over others. Which I think accurately describes a lot of the different ways that different groups have power over people. In the interview with Ellen Pao that we watched this week, also in the Algorithms of Oppression that we read by, excuse me, let me just make sure I get the name right, Safia Noble, and then also the Wired article that we read this week by, excuse me, just make sure I get the name right here. I took lots of notes on that. Jessica Hempel, Women's History of Silicon Valley. And all of these the readings and the interview all focused on how certain groups of people, mainly usually cishet white men, straight, have control, power in the tech industry. So that group is the one oppressing the others. And we also learned about how Silicon Valley, so the culture that Ellen Pao and then also in the Wired article sort of allude to, is that in the early 2000s, people from Wall Street, the sort of bro frat culture, I should say, that existed in Wall Street moved to Silicon Valley. And as the Wired article points out, when Newsweek chose to highlight the founding people of Silicon Valley, they used the word founding fathers. And the Wired article pointed out that, wait, hold on a second, there are actually women that were responsible. And as we have learned in our class, some of the first programmers were women. And, if you've seen Hidden Figures, you know that many of those women were African American, which leads me to segue over into Algorithms of Oppression, which started when the author, Safia Noble, wanted to find some videos and articles. Her stepdaughter was having a sleepover, and she typed in black girls, and some of the first results were porn results, which is obviously troublesome. And she talks about how Google sort of refuses to step up and change some of their algorithms of this. She uses examples of, when President Obama and his wife, Michelle, they lived in the White House, you would type in a certain word, which as a cis white person, I shouldn't say whatsoever. But you typed in that horrific word and the White House came up. So just doing that Google search or typing in what you get when you typed in gorillas, just some horrific racist, white supremacists. She even brings up how if you type in the word Jew, you can come up with some, Holocaust denier sites, white supremacist sites, homophobic sites. But Google's suggestion on what to do about that was, just search Jewish people or search Jews. So that leads to a power differential there. Like, what if people aren't educated enough? Like, what if we as information professionals don't teach people how to search correctly? And she does call out information professionals in her book, saying that we should be better at, teaching people how to search correctly. Or search better, maybe not necessarily correctly, search better. So they don't come up with, when they type in, why are black women, they get these angry, loud, they know what words to type in. They know not to type in Jew, since Google won't do that work. We have to do the work as well. And one quote I will just bring up that really particularly stuck out to me in the reading, which was the introduction and then the first chapter. So I'm just going to pull that out real quick. I've marked it. Something for us to think about as we continue in this course, and also if we are intending to go into the library information sciences field. As I have suggested, there are many myths about the internet, including the notion that what rises to the top of the information pile is strictly what is most popular, as indicated by hyperlinking. Were that even true, what is most popular is not necessarily what is most true. So thinking about, what might be the most popular hit when you look up on Google may not necessarily be what is most true. So we shouldn't necessarily always trust, like she notes in the book, that many people do trust their searches on Google. We shouldn't necessarily always trust what the top hits are, and a lot of times those are ads too. And the article in Wired really hit out at, bringing up different women. And it does point out that at the end of its article that it did largely choose just white cis women. There is one woman that they chose to highlight, which, let me bring that up, who was trans, Lynn Conway, and she got fired in 1968 when she chose to do gender reassignment surgery, which I can't even imagine in 1968. And so she had to hide who she was, which reminded me of a friend of mine who 10, 15 years ago came out as trans and was dropped from their mathematical program, PhD program. So this sort of stuff is still happening today, and I can't even imagine 1968 doing that. But they do point out that this list is not comprehensive. They're just bringing up, and there are certainly other minorities whose voices we are silencing, and by only highlighting these white men or highlighting these white women and their contributions that they have made. And so it's like cementing this hegemony of white cis het men that are still sort of running Silicon Valley, which then Ellen Powell brings up, misogyny and the harassment that she faced in this culture, which unfortunately her video made me think a lot about what's happened in the last 2 weeks, about how we don't necessarily want to believe women, even other women don't want to believe women. And I'm sorry about that little segue into politics, but I couldn't help but think about it when I was watching her video and some of the things that she faced, like even though she was making a lot of money, she wasn't making nearly as much as her male counterparts. And she eventually sued the company she was working for and got fired because of that. And they said, well, it can't be that bad because you never reported it, which is, of course, similar things that we heard these last couple of weeks in the news. Yeah. On that note, I do want to leave off on a more positive note. So I will just leave off with a quote from not Donna Dubinsky, from Lynn Conway, when she eventually did come out as trans and was nearing retirement. A newspaper approached her about advice that she would give. And she said, if you want to change the future, start living as if you're already there. So just words of wisdom for us as we continue on in this information field. We have to continue changing the future. We have to teach people how to search so they're not finding these algorithms, so we can move away from these algorithms of oppression. And so we can be these top people at these top tech companies where we can change the laws, where we can make it a culture that is not misogynistic, is not sexist, is not homophobic or racist. And so on that note, I will leave you, and I hope that y'all have a lovely weekend.